It's strange how silence becomes a companion after loss. In the beginning, it was unbearable, too loud, too present. Now, it feels like an old friend who simply sits beside me and doesn't ask for explanations. The year has passed since Gregory's death, the year since I learned the truth, and learned who I was without him. The sea outside my window moves the same way every morning, slow, deliberate, endless. I built a routine around it. Coffee at 6. Walk by 7. Write a little, breathe a lot. Sometimes I catch myself talking to him out loud, not because I expect an answer, just because I miss the sound of being known. I'd stopped expecting surprises from life, but life, as I've learned, loves to wait until you're steady again before it throws another stone. One afternoon, I came home to find a small, weathered package on my doorstep. No return address. No note, just my name, Bianca, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single cassette tape and a folded letter. The handwriting on the letter was neat, precise, a woman's. Dear Bianca, I know I have no right to write you. I hesitated for months before sending this. My name is Claire. I was Gregory's nurse during his treatments. My chest tightened. I read on. He spoke about you often. Not in guilt, but in awe. Said you were the only person who ever saw him clearly. Before he died, he gave me this tape. He asked me to hold on to it until a year had passed, said you'd need to hear it then, not before. I stared at the cassette, my hands trembling. There was no explanation, no warning, just that small piece of plastic holding whatever voice he'd left behind. I found an old player in a thrift shop down the street, dusted it off, and sat by the window. Outside, the ocean moved like breath. Inside, the air was still. When I pressed play, there was a crackle of static, then his voice, faint but unmistakable. Hey, B. It was softer than I remembered, fragile. Human, like he was speaking from somewhere just beyond reach. If you're hearing this, it means you kept going, and that's all I ever wanted. He paused, a faint exhale catching in his throat. There's one last truth I couldn't tell you before, not because I wanted to protect you this time, but because I needed to protect someone else. I sat up, my pulse quickening. The night of the fire, Mia wasn't supposed to be there, but she came back. My heart stilled. She found out I was going to end it and tried to stop me. She begged me to go to the hospital, said you could forgive me if I just told you everything. We argued. She left before I lit the match. I thought she was gone. A shaky breath, but she wasn't. She went upstairs to pack my things, to save whatever pieces she could for you, and when the fire caught, she went back in. She didn't make it out. My body went cold. They never found her body because of the damage. They assumed it was mine. By the time they confirmed the dental records, I was already gone. I told the coroner not to correct the report. I wanted her to have peace, and you to have freedom. The room tilted. The cassette kept spinning. I'm sorry, B. I couldn't save either of you the way I wanted, but maybe, in another life, I'll learn how to love without breaking what I touch. A long silence followed, just the sound of the tape winding to its end, then a final whisper, almost inaudible. Goodbye, my love. Click. I sat there frozen, staring at the player as if it could undo what I'd heard. Mia was gone, truly gone. She hadn't run, she hadn't hidden. She'd died trying to save him, and, in her own way, me. The truth hit like a wave, the kind that doesn't drown you but forces you to relearn how to breathe. I drove to the lake that night, the same lake where we'd confronted each other, where so much had come undone. The water was still, the moonlight stretching across its surface like glass. I knelt at the edge and dropped the cassette in, watching the ripples spread outward. One small circle, then another, then nothing. That was the last secret, the final piece of the story. I stayed there until dawn, my hands buried in the damp earth, the sky turning from gray to gold, and as the first light touched the water, I realized something. Forgiveness wasn't about letting go of people. It was about releasing the version of yourself that kept waiting for them to come back. So I whispered into the quiet morning, for both of you, I forgive you. And I forgive me. The wind carried it across the lake, and for the first time in years, I felt light. That was 6 months ago. The sea outside my window still moves the same way every morning, but now, I move with it. There's peace here. Not the kind that forgets, but the kind that remembers without hurting. Sometimes I think about writing everything down, every lie, every truth, every letter, and fire and silence, but then I realize, this is the writing. This voice, this story, this confession, the only way I know how to make sense of what love took and what it gave. So if you're listening, if you've ever loved someone who hurt you, or lost someone who never got to explain why. Remember this, you don't need all the answers to heal, you just need the courage to keep living without them. Pause, soft ocean waves in background, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say after everything is over, is nothing at all, just silence. The kind that means, you survived. I used to believe that when a marriage ends, you can hear it, like the slow cracking of glass before it finally shatters, but the truth is, it's quieter than that. It ends in moments so small you don't even notice. A glance that lingers too long. A hug that feels like habit. A dinner where only the cutlery speaks. That's how mine ended, in silence. We weren't fighting. We weren't even unhappy. At least, I didn't think we were. Gregory was steady. Predictable. The kind of man who always paid the bills on time, remembered birthdays, and kissed me goodbye every morning even when I was still half asleep. We'd been married 9 years, together 12.2 kids. A golden retriever named Milo, and a life that, from the outside, probably looked fine, but fine is a dangerous word. Fine is what you say when you've stopped being honest with them, and with yourself. I remember the night everything shifted. It was raining, that cold, steady kind of rain that sounds like a whisper against the windows. Gregory had just come home late from work. He smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. Not anything I owned. It wasn't obvious, just a trace of something floral, expensive, wrong. When I asked if he'd eaten, he said yes too quickly. That was the first moment I noticed how easily he could lie. I didn't confront him. Not yet. You learn to live with your doubts when you love someone. They become background noise, easy to ignore, but doubts have a way of growing teeth. 2 weeks later, I was doing laundry when I found it. The second phone. It was tucked inside the inner pocket of his black jacket, the one he wore when he said he was working late. It wasn't locked. No passcode, almost like he wanted me to find it. When I turned it on, the screen lit up with messages, dozens of them. Most were from a name saved as Mia 2 Hearts. And at that moment, my whole world became quiet. I don't even remember breathing. Her messages weren't dirty. That almost made it worse. They were sweet, familiar. How's your day? Drive safe. Wish I could see you tonight. It was intimacy. The kind I thought belonged to me, the kind I'd been starving for without realizing it. When Gregory came home that night, I didn't say a word. I just watched him move around the house like everything was normal. The way he laughed with the kids, the way he kissed me goodnight without looking into my eyes. I lay awake listening to his breathing. Even his sleep sounded peaceful, like he was living 2 lives and resting well in both. The next morning, I waited until he left for work. Then I sat in the kitchen with that phone on the table in front of me. It felt like holding evidence of my own foolishness. I scrolled photos. Texts. Calls at odd hours. One message said, I miss your smell on my pillow. Another said, she almost caught me last night. I felt my heart stop at that one. He wasn't even afraid. He was excited that day. Something inside me died, quietly but not all at once. It was a slow, cruel unraveling, slight pause, breath. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my friends, because when you love someone, even when they destroy you, your first instinct is to protect them. To protect the story of you, even when it's already ended. Weeks passed. I kept pretending. I'd make him dinner. Ask about work. Smile in photos. Meanwhile, I watched him slip away piece by piece. Every text I read, every lie he told, I memorized in silence. And then one night, I broke. He was in the shower again, humming softly, the same tune he always did. I walked in, holding the phone. My hands were shaking, my voice quiet. Who's Mia? He froze. Not confusion, recognition, and that told me everything. He sat down on the edge of the bed, water still dripping from his hair. He didn't deny it. Didn't fight. Didn't beg. He just said, I didn't mean for it to go this far. And I think that's when I finally cried, not because he cheated, but because he made it sound so small. This FAR.as if love could be measured in inches. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room until morning, staring at the family photo on the wall. Our smiles looked rehearsed now. Even the kids seemed like props in a play I didn't realize I was performing in. When the sun came up, I left a note on the counter. It said, I hope she was worth the silence. Then I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. Some endings don't need noise. That was 2 years ago. I've rebuilt myself since then. Slowly. Carefully. I learned how to sleep alone, how to eat dinner without setting 2 plates, how to stop checking my phone for messages that won't come, and then, last week, something happened, something I never saw coming. A message from an unknown number. It said, "He's gone. I thought you should know. Signed, Mia. I stared at it for a long time. My first thought wasn't anger. It was relief, then guilt for feeling that relief. But here's the part that still keeps me awake. When I looked closer at the message thread, I realized something strange. The number wasn't new. It was one I used to call, years ago, before Gregory, and that's when I saw the photo. Her photo. Mia wasn't a stranger, she was my sister. You never really know how deep betrayal runs until you find it in your own blood. People think grief ends when the funeral does. It doesn't. It lingers, like smoke after a fire, clinging to everything it touched. For weeks after I buried Gregory's letters, I moved through life like a ghost in my own house. Every sound felt amplified, the ticking of the kitchen clock, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of rain against glass, and beneath it all, the silence he left behind. I learned something about silence. It's not empty. It's full of everything we didn't say, the town didn't make it easy either. At first, the neighbors dropped by with casseroles and sympathy. Then, whispers began, soft, careful, poisonous. They'd lower their voices when I walked past the grocery aisle. She found out too late, you know. Poor woman. Her sister and her husband, tragic, really. But you can't say she didn't see it coming. I pretended not to hear, but grief makes you sensitive to tone, to the way people shape your story without your permission, and still, I stayed quiet, because what could I say? That my husband loved my sister out of a promise, not passion, that he burned himself alive to protect a lie my mother started, that forgiveness feels more like exhaustion than peace. No, they wouldn't understand. So I let them talk. Sometimes, letting people believe the simpler version of the story is a mercy. I went back to work 2 months later. The office looked the same, but I didn't. Something inside me had shifted, like the hinge of a door that would never close right again. People were kind at first, too kind. They walked on eggshells, careful not to mention marriage, or family, or fire, and that carefulness felt like pity, worse than cruelty. I started having lunch alone in the park across the street. There was a bench near the fountain where Gregory once met me after work, holding a coffee and that ridiculous grin that used to make me forgive him for anything. Now, the memory only made me feel tired, not angry, just tired. One afternoon, while I was sitting there, Mia showed up. I almost didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was darker, her clothes simple. No makeup, no armor. She didn't sit beside me right away, just stood there, holding a paper bag. "I brought you something," she said. Her voice was quiet, respectful, the way you'd speak in a church. Inside the bag was a small journal, bound in brown leather. Gregory's handwriting covered the first page. "To Mia, when the guilt becomes too heavy, write, it won't save you. But it might keep you breathing." She smiled sadly. "He gave it to me the day before the fire. I couldn't open it. I thought you should have it." I didn't say thank you. I didn't have to. We both understood that this was her way of saying sorry, again, and maybe for the last time. That night, I opened the journal. It wasn't a diary. It was a collection of unfinished letters, all written to me. Some started with B, others with my love. Some stopped mid-sentence, as if he'd been interrupted. One page caught my breath. "If I had one more morning with you, I'd tell you the truth without trying to protect you. I'd tell you that love isn't supposed to be clean. It's supposed to scar you, shape you, make you choose who you become after the breaking." I read it over and over, until the ink blurred from tears. Maybe that's what this was, not punishment, but transformation. A brutal kind of rebirth. Weeks turned into months. I started running again, the same route I used to take before work. At first, my body protested, but with each breath, I felt lighter. I stopped wearing my wedding ring, not out of bitterness, just acceptance. Sometimes, you take something off not because it hurts, but because you've healed enough to let go. I sold the house that fall, packed the last box, locked the door, and stood on the porch one final time. The new owners were a young couple, all bright eyes and nervous excitement. The wife smiled at me and said, "It's a beautiful home." And for the first time, I meant it when I smiled back. "It is. Take care of it. It remembers everything." I moved to a smaller place by the coast, quiet, unassuming. Every morning I walked down to the water and watched the horizon bleed into gold. It's strange how healing sounds like waves, not words. Sometimes, I still dream of Gregory, not the man who lied, or the man who burned, just the man who held my hand under a sky full of promises. before life asked us to carry more than we could. In those dreams, we're standing by the lake again, young and foolish, before secrets turned our love into something tragic. He always smiles, touches my cheek, and says, "You're free now, B." And when I wake up, I believe him a little more each time. Forgiveness didn't come as one grand moment. It came quietly, like morning light through a curtain, little by little. I forgave my mother for her silence, Mia for her weakness, Gregory for his choices, and then, one day, I realized the hardest person to forgive was myself, for not seeing it, for blaming love when it was really fear, for holding on too long to what was already gone. There's something I learned through all of this, something I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't move on from pain, you move with it, until it becomes lighter to carry. That's the real reckoning, not revenge, not closure, just the quiet understanding that you survived the truth. I record this now not for pity, or closure, but for anyone listening who's ever loved someone who lied, not out of malice, but out of love's desperate, clumsy attempt to protect. Because love doesn't always save you, sometimes it destroys you just enough to show you who you really are, and if you're lucky, if you survive the burning, you rise not as who you were, but as who you were meant to become. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt heavier somehow, as if it knew what I had read, as if walls could carry shame. Every clock ticked louder, every shadow stretched longer. I kept turning the letter over in my hands, tracing the shape of my mother's handwriting, the same curves I used to watch as a child when she'd sign permission slips or Christmas cards. Now, those same strokes felt like a confession written in code. Mia wasn't just my sister, she was my mother's hidden wound. Gregory had known all along, and carried the burden silently, protecting a secret that was never his to keep. I should have felt anger, but what came instead was pity for him, for her, for all of us, because love, I was realizing, doesn't always save people. Sometimes it's the reason they drown. By morning, I found myself walking through our old study again. The smell of dust and paper still lingered. The same chair where Gregory would sit with his whiskey late at night faced the window. I used to think he was staring at the stars. Maybe he was just trying to escape what he couldn't say. I switched on the desk lamp. Beneath the drawer's false bottom, something only I would have known to check, I found a small folder marked insurance/medical. It looked new, unlike the older files yellowed with time. Inside were hospital letters dated 3 months before the fire. Gregory had been seeing an oncologist, stage 3 pancreatic cancer. My heart froze. He hadn't told me. He hadn't told anyone. There were test results, treatment options, handwritten notes in the margins, his handwriting, shaky but steady. At the bottom of one form, he'd scribbled, "No more lies. Let Bianca be free before it's too late." Tears blurred my vision. I realized then, he hadn't planned to leave me for Mia. He'd planned to leave both of us. I sat there for hours, piecing together timelines like fragments of broken glass. The late-night drives, the hushed phone calls, the sudden distance that I'd mistaken for guilt. He wasn't pulling away because of her. He was dying, and trying to make things right before he did. And the fire, I closed my eyes, remembering the night it happened, the sharp smell of smoke, the flashing red lights, the sound of the neighbors shouting. They said it was an accident, faulty wiring, maybe, but now, that explanation felt too convenient. The report had mentioned something, a gas leak, possibly ignited near his study. But what if it hadn't been an accident at all? The next day, I drove to the old fire station where the report had been filed. The officer on duty was new, but he found the archived file after a few minutes. "House fire on Maple Grove Lane, right?" he asked. I nodded. He flipped through the documents, then he frowned. There's a note here. Case was closed as accidental, but one of the investigators made an observation, said it looked intentional." Intentional? Yeah. Like someone might have tampered with the gas line deliberately. But since there was only one fatality and no insurance claim dispute, it wasn't pursued. I stared at the paper. "1 fatality.no investigation.no closured." I thanked him and left, my mind spinning. That night, I went back to the house, to the study, and sat in the same chair Gregory used to sit in. The rain had started again, soft against the window pane. I turned off the lights and let the darkness settle. It wasn't until I opened his old laptop that I found the final piece. The password was still the same, our wedding song's title. Inside his documents folder was one last video file, named 4B. My hand shook as I clicked it. The screen lit up. Gregory sat at his desk, pale and gaunt, a faint smile flickering through the pane. "Hey, Love, he began softly, if you're seeing this, it means I ran out of time. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything face to face. I wanted to. Every single night, I rehearsed it. But every time I looked at you, I couldn't break your heart, not with what I'd already done. He exhaled slowly, the sound catching in his chest. Mia didn't destroy us. I did. Not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to be honest, your mother's secret. I promised her I'd keep it, but I should have told you. I thought I could carry it, but it changed me. Made me weaker. Made me hide. He paused, swallowing hard. When I found out I was sick, I realized the truth had to come out, even if it ruined everything. You deserve to know what kind of man you really married. The night of the fire wasn't an accident. I tampered with the line myself. My heart stopped. He looked straight into the camera, calm, resigned. I couldn't bear the thought of you finding me half alive, fading away in a hospital bed. I thought if I could end it here, maybe it would all look like bad luck. Maybe you'd hate me, but at least you'd be free. I didn't plan for the fire to spread. I thought it would be fast. His eyes shimmered. I'm sorry, B. I wanted to make peace with everyone before I left, but I ran out of time. Tell Mia I forgave her. Tell her she's more like you than she thinks, too much heart for her own good. He took a deep breath. Don't look for reasons anymore. Just live. Live the way I couldn't. The screen went black. I sat there long after the video ended, the glow of the monitor still burning into my eyes. My hands were numbed. It was all so clear now, and yet, it didn't make the pain smaller. He hadn't betrayed me out of lust or deceit. He'd betrayed me out of love twisted by fear, and in trying to save me, he'd destroyed us both. I buried the letter and the video together in the garden the next morning, right under the oak tree where we'd first carved our initials. The ground was cold. Soft, the kind of earth that remembers. As I pressed the last handful of dirt over the box, I whispered, rest now, Gregory. The truth's out. I'll carry it for both of us. Weeks passed. I didn't speak to Mia again, not at first, but one evening, she left a small box at my door, no note, no name. Inside was a single photograph of us as children, holding hands by the lake. On the back, she'd written, we were innocent once. Maybe we can be again. I smiled through tears. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you gave all at once. Maybe it was something you grew into, day by day. And yet, sometimes, when I walk past the study door, I still smell the faint trace of smoke. I still feel him there, just behind the silence, not haunting me, just watching. Maybe guilt never truly leaves. Maybe love doesn't. Either way, the house feels lighter now. Not because it's healed, but because it's honest, and in the end, that's all any confession ever really is. Not an apology, not a plea, just the truth, finally spoken out loud. I didn't answer the message right away. For 2 days I just watched the words on the screen, hoping that if I stared long enough they'd rearrange themselves into something that made sense, but they didn't. He's gone. I thought you should know. My sister's name. At first I told myself it was coincidence. Lots of people are named Mia. It couldn't be her, not my sister, not the girl who braided my hair the night before my wedding, who toasted to forever with champagne and tears in her eyes, not the woman who stood beside me in every photo that now feels like a lie, but the number. It was one I'd called before. I recognized the pattern of digits the way you recognize a childhood melody. When we were kids, we used to recite our phone numbers like a secret code, and there it was. Her code. I scrolled through the old messages, the ones from years ago, holiday plans, silly memes, pictures of our kids playing together. Then, a gap. 2 years of silence, the same 2 years since I left Gregory. My chest tightened. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, then stopped. No voicemail. No response. Just absence. That's when I realized I'd been holding my breath. When I finally exhaled, it came out as a broken laugh, half disbelief, half hysteria, because what do you even call it when the person who betrays you twice wears your last name? The next morning I drove to her house. It was a quiet street, the kind that smells of rain and cut grass. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but the curtains in the living room were open, and through them I saw toys scattered across the floor. Her little boy, my nephew, was sitting on the couch, watching cartoons, completely unaware of the ruins surrounding his family. Her neighbor was outside trimming hedges. Hey, he said, recognizing me. You're Mia's sister, right? I'm sorry for your loss. His voice blurred after that. Your loss. So it was true. I left before the tears came. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once found Gregory's second phone, and opened my laptop. The news was easy to find. Local man found dead in apartment fire. The photo was small but unmistakable. Gregory, the article said, electrical fault. Accidental. He'd been alone. I should have felt something. Anger. Sadness. Relief. Anything. Instead I felt hollow, like every emotion had been wrung out of me years ago. Then, at the bottom of the article, one line stood out. He is survived by a long-term partner, Mia Thompson. My sister's married name. It's strange what your body does in moments like that. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't speed up. I just went very still enough to hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, my pulse in my ears. I wanted to scream. To throw the laptop across the room, but all I did was whisper, why? Not to her. Not to him. To myself, because somewhere deep down, part of me knew that the distance between my sister and me had started long before Gregory, knew that her laughter at our wedding had been too bright, too forced, knew that love and envy often share the same face. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for something special. I drank it straight from the bottle. By the time the glass was half empty, I'd typed out a message. I know everything. Tell me the truth. I didn't expect a reply, but 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. If you really knew everything, she wrote, you'd hate me less. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It didn't sound defensive. It sounded tired, like someone who'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. We met 2 days later at a cafe halfway between our towns. She looked smaller somehow, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes rimmed red. When she saw me, she flinched. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said softly. I sat down across from her. You slept with my husband, I said. No greeting. No preamble. She nodded. I loved him, she whispered. I laughed, loud, bitter. That's convenient. For a moment we just stared at each other. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. Then she said, you don't know what he told me. I wanted to stop her, but curiosity is a cruel thing. What did he tell you, Mia? That you didn't love him anymore. That you were cold. That you stayed for the kids. That he was lonely. Her voice cracked. I believed him. I shouldn't have, but I did. My jaw tightened. And that made it okay? No, she said quickly. Nothing about it was okay. But it made it possible. I looked away, blinking hard. You watched me fall apart. You held my hand through the divorce. You knew what he'd done and you let me think it was some stranger. Tears slipped down her face. I tried to stop it. After you left, I told him to go to you. To fix it. He said you'd moved on. I moved out, I said. Not on. She covered her face with both hands. I thought he was going to leave me too. And then the fire happened. Her voice broke completely. I didn't comfort her. I just watched her crumble the way I once had. And somewhere inside me a cruel, quiet satisfaction took root. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. Why did you message me? Because he left something for you, she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. My name was written on it in Gregory's handwriting. I hesitated before taking it. I didn't read it, she said. I couldn't. I slipped the letter into my purse without looking at it. I'll read it when I'm ready. We left the cafe without another word. As I walked away, I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't forgive her either. She was just another ghost in a story that refused to end. That night, I sat on my bed with the envelope in my hands. Gregory's handwriting, steady, familiar, stirred something I'd buried deep. I thought about burning it, but curiosity won again. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. His words were short. Careful. Like he knew time was running out. If you're reading this, it means I finally ran out of lies to live behind. I never wanted you to know the worst of me, but maybe you already did. Mia wasn't the first mistake, but she was the last. What you don't know is that none of this started with love. It started with a promise I couldn't keep. A promise? I frowned, reading on. When your mother got sick, I told her I'd look after your sister. She made me swear it. I tried. For years I kept my distance, but she needed help, and I confused protection with affection. I didn't mean to fall in love with her, but I did. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late to undo it. I dropped the letter. The room spun. My mother, the woman whose dying wish had been for her daughters to stay close. She'd trusted him to keep us together, and he'd done the opposite. I folded the letter back up, slid it into its envelope, and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Then I turned off the light. Sleep didn't come, only silence. The same silence that had started all of this.